The moment I saw my grandfather's prize stallion being led away by strangers in HOA windbreakers, I knew Patty Harrington had finally gone too far. That's a $300,000 horse, I muttered, my hand instinctively reaching for the sheriff's badge I hadn't worn in 2 years. What I discovered next about this suburban dictator's war against my 82-year-old grandfather would make your blood boil, and trust me, mine was already at volcanic levels. Where are you watching from? And have you ever dealt with an HOA that thinks they're above the law? My name is Jake Caldwell, and until 2 years ago, I was the youngest sheriff ever elected in Teton County, Wyoming. I'd left it all behind after a shooting that still wakes me up at 3 a.m. some nights, traded my badge for a quiet life running a security consulting firm in Denver, but when Grandpa Hank called me at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday, voice shaking like I'd never heard it, I knew my peaceful retirement was over. They're taking everything. Jake, he said, and I could hear the defeat in his voice. That Harrington woman says I owe $47,000 in fines, says if I don't pay by Friday, they're seizing the ranch. I was in my truck before he finished the sentence, watching Denver's lights fade in my rearview mirror as I headed north. The 4-hour drive gave me plenty of time to think about how the hell an HOA had any authority over a ranch that had been in our family since 1892. Grandpa had mentioned some new development nearby, Pine Ridge Estates. But our land had never been part of any subdivision. The sight that greeted me at 4 a.m. made my jaw drop. Gone was the simple wooden arch that marked the entrance to Caldwell Ranch. In its place stood a gaudy metal gate with Pine Ridge Estates, a managed community, emblazoned across it in gold letters. Security cameras pointed in every direction, and a guard shack sat where Grandpa's old mailbox used to be. I rolled down my window as a sleepy security guard approached. Sir, it's past visiting hours. The community office opens at 8 a.m. This is private property, I said, keeping my voice leveled despite the rage building in my chest. The Caldwell Ranch. I'm Jake Caldwell, and I'm here to see my grandfather. The guard consulted a clipboard, frowning. Says here the Caldwell property is under HOA administrative review. No unauthorized access until the board meeting on Friday. That's when I saw her for the first time, Patty Harrington, president of the Pine Ridge Estates HOA, power walking down the road at 4:15 a.m., like some kind of demented fitness influencer. She wore a velour tracksuit that probably cost more than most people's rent. Her bleached blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail so tight it looked painful. Even in the pre-dawn darkness, I could see the satisfied smirk on her face when she spotted me. Well, she said, slightly out of breath, as she approached. The prodigal grandson returns. Too little. Too late. I'm afraid. I stepped out of my truck, using my full 6'3" height to my advantage. Ma'am, I don't know what game you're playing, but this ranch doesn't fall under any HOA jurisdiction. She laughed, a sound like nails on a chalkboard. Oh, sweetie, you've been gone too long. Things change. When Pine Ridge Estates expanded last year, we graciously incorporated all adjacent properties into our community standards framework. Your grandfather signed the papers himself. That's a lie, I said flatly. Her eyes narrowed. Careful, Mr. Caldwell. Defamation is actionable. Your grandfather has accumulated $47,382 in fines for various violations. Non-payment results in property Zeitzera. It's all perfectly legal. She pulled out her phone and started recording. For the record, this is Patricia Harrington, HOA president, documenting an attempted trespass by Jake Caldwell at 4:18 a.m. Subject appears agitated and potentially violent. I kept my hands visible and my expression neutral. I dealt with enough people trying to provoke incidents to know better. I'd like to see these alleged violations and signatures. Community office. 8 a.m. She chirped. Until then, you'll need to leave, or I'll have security escort you off the property. The security guard looked uncomfortable. Shifting his weight from foot to foot, I caught his eye and saw recognition dawn. Hey, aren't you Sheriff Caldwell from the Johnson kidnapping case? Before I could answer, Patty's face went red. Former sheriff. He has no authority here. This is private property under HOA governance. Actually, I said, pulling out my phone, I'm calling the real sheriff. Tom Morrison's an old friend. I'm sure he'll be interested to hear about an HOA claiming authority over property that predates their existence by 130 years. Patty's smirk faltered for just a second before returning full force. Call whoever you want. The paperwork is ironclad. Your grandfathers had 6 months to comply with community standards. The horse seizure yesterday was just the beginning. My blood ran cold. You took choice? The Agricultural Review Board determined that livestock represents a non-conforming use in a residential community. The horse was humanely relocated pending sale to cover outstanding fines. I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head. In my sheriff days, I'd arrested people for far less than stealing a $300,000 Arabian stallion. But I needed to be smart about this. Patty Harrington might dress like a suburban soccer mom, but the calculated cruelty in her eyes told me she was far more dangerous. I'll see you at 8, I said, heading back to my truck. Oh, and Jake? She called after me. Your grandfather's quite frail these days. It would be such a shame if the stress of all this caused his health to deteriorate further. Perhaps you should convince him to accept our very generous buyout offer. $1.2 million for the whole ranch. That's more than fair for an old man who can barely maintain the property. I gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles went white. $1.2 million for 800 acres of prime Wyoming land with water rights and mineral deposits? The ranch was worth at least $15 million on the open market, but I just nodded and drove away. Already formulating a plan, I found a 24-hour diner in town and made some calls. Tom Morrison answered on the third ring, voice groggy but alert. Jake, that really you? Tom? I need a favor. Can you meet me at the Sunrise Diner? And bring everything you have on Pine Ridge Estates and Patricia Harrington. Give me 30 minutes, he said without hesitation. That's what I loved about Tom, no questions until he had coffee in hand. While I waited, I called my old deputy, Marcus Rodriguez, who now ran a private investigation firm. Marcus, I need you to dig into an HOA president named Patricia Harrington. Financial records. Legal history. The works. The Harrington who runs Pine Ridge? Marcus whistled low. Man, that woman's got half the county board in her pocket. What's she done now? She's trying to steal my grandfather's ranch. And Marcus? She took Zeus. Grandpa Hank's stallion? Oh, she done messed up now. I'm on it. Boss. Tom arrived right on schedule, looking every bit the sheriff in his crisp uniform despite the early hour. He slid into the booth across from me, signaling the waitress for coffee. Jake, good to see you. Though I'm guessing this isn't a social call, I laid out the situation, watching his expression grow darker with each detail. When I finished, he pulled out a thick folder. You're not the first person to have problems with Patty Harrington. We've had complaints from half the residents at Pine Ridge, but she's smart, always stays just inside the law. He spread out several documents. She took over the HOA 5 years ago. Since then, she's forced out 17 homeowners through fines and legal harassment. Most sold to her development company at way below market value. She has a development company? PhD Enterprises. Patricia Harrington Development. Cute. Right? Tom's voice dripped sarcasm. She targets properties, drives out the owners with fines, then buys them cheap. Made about $8 million in profit so far. I studied the papers. My investigative instincts kicking in. What about the expansion she mentioned? When did Pine Ridge supposedly annex the surrounding properties? Tom frowned. There was never any legal annexation. The county records show Pine Ridge ends at Meadow Creek, a full 2 miles from your grandfather's property line, so she's lying about jurisdiction? Looks like it. But Jake, she's got Judge Brennan's son on the HOA board. Getting any legal action through the courts is going to be tough. I smiled for the first time since getting Grandpa's call. Who said anything about going through the courts? By 7:45 a.m., I was standing outside the Pine Ridge Community Center, a building that looked like someone had tried to cross a Swiss chalet with a McMansion and failed spectacularly. Other residents were arriving for the 8 o'clock meeting, and I made note of their expressions: exhausted, defeated, angry. These people had been under Patty's thumb for too long. An elderly woman with a walker paused beside me. You're Henry's grandson, aren't you? The sheriff? Yes. Ma'am. Jake Caldwell. Her eyes filled with tears. She drove out my neighbor last month, Mrs. Shen. Sweetest woman you ever met. Patty fined her $15,000 because her grandson's bicycle was the wrong shade of blue. Said it violated the community color palette. $15,000 for a bike color? Oh, honey, that's nothing. She fined the Johnsons $20,000 because their daughter's Girl Scout cookie stand was an unauthorized commercial enterprise. Those poor folks had to take out a second mortgage. More stories poured out as other residents recognized me. Patty had created a reign of terror through weaponized bureaucracy, using a 70-page HOA rulebook that she amended monthly without proper votes, fines for grass being 1/8 inch too tall, for curtains visible from the street, for American flags hung on the wrong type of pole. At exactly 8 a.m., the doors opened and we filed in. The meeting room was set up like a courtroom, with Patty and her board elevated on a platform above the rest of us. She sat in the center like a queen holding court, wearing a different tracksuit, pink this time, and enough jewelry to stock a small store. "Good morning, neighbors," she chirped with fake enthusiasm. "What a wonderful day in our beautiful community. Before we begin our regular business, I believe we have a guest. Mr. Caldwell, would you please stand?" I stood, meeting her gaze steadily. "Mr. Caldwell is here regarding his grandfather's property violations. As you all know, we must maintain standards to protect everyone's property values and quality of life." She pulled out a binder that must have weighed 10 pounds. "Henry Caldwell has accumulated 647 violations over the past 6 months. Gasps echoed through the room. I kept my expression neutral. "I'd like to see documentation of when my grandfather's property became part of the HOA. Patty's smile could have frozen hell. "Page 1 of your grandfather's signature packet." She held up a document, signed and notarized on January 15th of this year. I walked forward and took the paper, studying it carefully. The signature did look like Grandpa's, but something was off. The date was written in a different color ink, and the notary stamp was smudged. More importantly, I happened to know that on January 15th, Grandpa had been in the hospital recovering from hip surgery. "This is forged," I said simply. The room erupted. Patty banged a gavel she'd apparently brought from home. "Order, Mr. Caldwell. That's a serious accusation. I'll add defamation to your grandfather's fines. That's another $5,000. "Actually," I said, pulling out my phone, "I have his hospital records right here. Admitted January 12th. Discharged January 20th. So unless he signed this from his hospital bed, many documents can be signed remotely." Patty interrupted. "Your grandfather was clearly of sound mind, was he? Because I also have a statement from his doctor noting that he was on heavy pain medication that week. Legally, he couldn't have signed any binding documents." Patty's face was turning an interesting shade of purple. "The signature was witnessed and notarized. That makes it legal." "By whom?" I asked. "Because I'd love to meet this notary." She shuffled papers. "Monica Brennan, Judge Brennan's daughter-in-law, who also happens to be on your HOA board. How convenient." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I could see doubt creeping into the faces of Patty's board members. This was the crack I needed. "But let's say, for argument's sake, the signature is real," I continued. "You still have no authority over property that isn't part of Pine Ridge Estates. The Caldwell Ranch is 2 miles outside your boundary." Patty smiled triumphantly. "Not according to the amended community charter, approved by member vote last December. We expanded our governance to include all properties within a 5-mile radius to ensure consistent community standards." "Interesting. And how many members voted for this expansion?" "The vote was unanimous among board members." "Board members only? Not the general membership?" Her smile flickered. "The board has authority to make such decisions for the good of the community." "Actually, they don't," said a voice from the back. Everyone turned to see a man in a suit standing in the doorway. "Danielle Morrison, attorney at law. I represent several Pine Ridge residents, and I've been recording this entire meeting. Mrs. Harrington, you've just admitted to violating state HOA regulations, which require a 70% vote of all members for boundary changes." Patty's gavel banging was reaching woodpecker levels. "You can't record without permission. This is a private meeting. It's a public HOA meeting." "Actually," Daniel said, "and I have every right to record. Just like I had every right to file an injunction this morning preventing any further action against the Caldwell property until a full investigation can be conducted. I could have kissed him." Patty looked like she'd swallowed a lemon wrapped in barbed wire. "This is harassment. I'm calling my lawyer." "Please do," Daniel said. "I'm sure he'll be interested to know that you've been operating outside your legal authority for over a year, Every fine you've collected from properties outside the original Pine Ridge boundaries constitutes fraud. The room exploded. Residents were on their feet, shouting questions, demanding refunds. Patty's board members were sliding away from her like she had the plague. But Patty wasn't done. She stood up, abandoning all pretense of suburban sweetness. You think you've won? I've been planning this for years. That ranch is sitting on the largest aquifer in the county. Do you have any idea what water rights are worth? Your stupid grandfather has been squatting on a gold mine, letting horses drink water worth millions. There it was, the real motivation. It wasn't about property values or community standards. It was about water rights in an increasingly dry state. So you forged documents to steal it? I asked. Prove it. She snarled. I have connections you can't imagine. Judges, county commissioners, state representatives. You're just some washed-up ex-sheriff with PTSD. Who do you think they'll believe? I smiled. Well, considering you just confessed to attempted theft of water rights in front of 47 witnesses and at least 3 recording devices, I think my job here is done. Her face went white as she realized what she'd said. The meeting devolved into chaos as she tried to grab phones and cameras from residents. Her loyal security guard had mysteriously disappeared, probably updating his resume in the parking lot. This isn't over, Patty screamed as she retreated toward the exit, clutching her giant binder like a shield. I'll bury you in lawsuits. Your grandfather will die penniless in a nursing home. She was cut off by the arrival of 2 county sheriff's deputies. Tom Morrison walked in behind them, tipping his hat to me. Mrs. Harrington, we need you to come with us. We have questions about fraudulent documents and theft of a horse valued at $300,000. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. No one's arresting you yet, Tom said patiently. We just need to ask some questions. Of course, if you refuse to cooperate, Patty looked around wildly for support. But her board had evaporated like morning mist. The residents she'd terrorized for years watched with satisfaction as she was escorted out. Still shrieking about her connections and threatening lawsuits, I turned to the crowd. For what it's worth, Daniel here is willing to help anyone who was illegally fined get their money back. And if you need to reach me, I'll be at the ranch with my grandfather. As I headed for the door, the elderly woman with the walker caught my arm. Thank you, she whispered. We've been living in fear for so long. I didn't think anyone could stop her. She stopped herself. I said, bullies always do. Eventually, outside, I found Marcus Rodriguez waiting by my truck, grinning like a cat with a canary. Boss, you're gonna love this. I did some digging on PhD Enterprises. Turns out Patty's been in debt up to her eyeballs. She borrowed $2 million from some very unfriendly people to buy up properties, thinking she'd flip them quick. But the market tanked, and now she's desperate. How desperate? Desperate enough to forge documents and steal horses? Also, remember that notary, Monica Brennan? She lost her license 3 months ago for fraud. Every document she notarized since then is invalid. I felt the last piece click into place. So every supposed violation, every fine, toilet paper, Marcus confirmed. Patty's going down hard. Boss, and from what I hear, there's already a forensic accountant looking at the HOA books. Want to guess how much of that fine money went into her personal accounts? I didn't need to guess. People like Patty always thought they were too smart to get caught. They built elaborate schemes, intimidated anyone who questioned them, and forgot that eventually someone would stand up to them. But as satisfying as the morning had been, I knew this was far from over. Patty Harrington didn't seem like the type to go down without a fight, and there was still the matter of getting Zeus back. I drove through the newly unguarded gate of Caldwell Ranch, noting that someone had already started removing the gaudy Pine Ridge signs. The familiar sight of the old farmhouse, with its wraparound porch and wind vanes spinning lazily on the barn, made my throat tight. Grandpa was sitting on the porch, looking frailer than I remembered but with fire back in his eyes. Saw it all on the Facebook, he said, holding up his tablet. That Chen girl was recording the whole meeting, already got 12,000 views. I sat down beside him, breathing in the smell of hay and horses that meant home. We're not done yet. She's still got Zeus. Oh, I wouldn't worry about that, Grandpa said with a sly smile. Mabel called from the Riverside stables. Seems someone anonymously reported that they were holding stolen property. Sheriff's department is there now. and Mabel's only too happy to return Zeus to his rightful owners. Mabel Riverside? Didn't she used to date you back in high school? Grandpa's grin widened. Might have. And she might have been waiting 40 years for a chance to stick it to Patty Harrington. See, Patty stole Mabel's boyfriend in 1982. Woman hot long memories. Jake? I laughed. Really laughed. For the first time in days, but it was cut short by the sound of engines coming up the drive. Not cars, ATVs, 4 of them, carrying men in HOA security uniforms. Afternoon. Gentlemen, the lead rider called out, removing his helmet to reveal a face that had seen too many bar fights. We're here to secure HOA property pending resolution of ownership disputes. I stood up slowly. This isn't OA property, and you're trespassing. We have authorization from President Harrington, he said, pulling out what looked like official papers. This property is under HOA jurisdiction until proven otherwise. Patty's not president of anything anymore, I said, and those papers aren't worth the ink they're printed with. The man smiled unpleasantly. Maybe not, but there's 4 of us, and 2 of you, one being an old man. We'll be conducting a property inspection for safety violations. You understand? I looked at these 4 wannabe enforcers and almost felt sorry for them. Almost. The lead guy, who had Brad stitched on his fake tactical vest, was trying hard to look intimidating. But I'd faced down actual drug cartels in my sheriff days. These guys were playing dress-up. Before you boys do something stupid, I said calmly, you should know that impersonating law enforcement is a felony in Wyoming. Those badges you're wearing, the ones that say HOA security enforcement, that's gonna land you 2 to 5 years? Brad laughed, but I caught the uncertainty in his eyes. We're private security. Perfectly legal. Really? Let me see your licenses. The men exchanged glances. Brad's jaw tightened. Don't need to show you nothing. Actually, you do, said a familiar voice. Tom Morrison walked around the corner of the house, hand resting casually on his service weapon. Wyoming Statute 26-18-115. Private security must present credentials upon request. So let's see them. Gentlemen. Behind Tom came 3 deputies, including Maria Santos, who I'd trained years ago. She gave me a subtle nod. Apparently, Tom had anticipated trouble. This is private HOA business. Brad protested, but his voice had lost its edge. On private property that doesn't belong to the HOA. Tom countered. Mr. Caldwell, do these men have permission to be on your ranch? They do not, I said firmly. Then, gentlemen, you're trespassing. You have 30 seconds to get back on those ATVs and leave. Or we'll be taking you in. Brad looked like he wanted to argue, but one of his buddies was already backing toward his ATV. Patty said this was legal, Brad muttered. Patty says a lot of things. I replied, how much is she paying you to commit felonies? 500 each. One of the younger guys blurted out before Brad could stop him. Said it was easy money? Just intimidate some old rancher. Grandpa stood up then, all 5'8" of him. And despite his 82 years, something in his stance made Brad step back. Son, I've been running off claim jumpers and cattle thieves since before you were born. You think some HOA rent-a-cops are gonna scare me? I've got a 12 gauge that says otherwise. No need for that. Grandpa, I said, though I appreciated the spirit, these gentlemen were just leaving. They left, engines roaring in what I'm sure they thought was a defiant exit, but really just sounded like a retreat. Tom watched them go, then turned to me. Jake, we've got a problem. Patty made bail an hour ago. How? It was set at $200,000. Someone put up their house as collateral. Monica Brennan, the fake notary. Seems she and Patty go way back. Tom's expression was grim. And there's more. Patty's been making calls. Word is she's hired some out-of-state law firm that specializes in property disputes. They're filing an emergency injunction, claiming the ranch is abandoned property because Hank hasn't paid property taxes. Grandpa snorted. I've paid every tax bill for 60 years. Never missed a one. Can you prove it? Maria asked gently. Course I can. Got every receipt in my filing cabinet. We went inside, and I helped Grandpa pull out years of meticulously organized tax records. Everything was there. Payments all up to date, except for this year's bill. I never got one for this year. Grandpa said, frowning, figured they were running late. Tom and I exchanged looks. Let me guess. I said. Someone at the tax office is friends with Patty? The head clerk is her cousin. Tom confirmed. Dollars to donuts? She made sure Hank never got his bill. Then planned to swoop in when the property went to tax auction, except she got impatient. I said, pieces falling into place. When Grandpa didn't miss the payment because he never knew about it, she moved to Plan B with the fake HOA takeover. We need to get to the tax office before it closes. Maria said, checking her watch. It's 2:30 now. I'll drive. I said, but Grandpa shook his head. This is my land. My fight. I'm coming too. The county tax office was a squat brick building that hadn't been updated since the 70s. We walked in to find a nervous-looking clerk behind the counter, not Patty's cousin. Thankfully, we need to pay property taxes for the Caldwell Ranch. I said. The clerk typed on her ancient computer, "Oh, that property has a hold on it. I can't accept payment without supervisor approval. Where's your supervisor? Mrs. Elkins? She left early today. Personal emergency." Tom leaned on the counter. Would this personal emergency have anything to do with her cousin Patty being questioned by the sheriff's department? The clerk went pale. I don't know anything about that. Here's what you do know, I said, keeping my voice friendly but firm. You know that preventing someone from paying their taxes is a crime. You know that being part of a conspiracy to steal property through tax manipulation is a federal offense. And you know that the right thing to do is let Mr. Caldwell pay his taxes right now. The clerk looked between us. Then at her computer screen, the system, it won't let me override the hold. Then call someone who can. Tom suggested, the county administrator. Maybe? While the clerk made calls, I noticed something on her desk, a memo pad with PhD Enterprises letterhead. I nudged Tom, who saw it too. Miss, where did you get that notepad? He asked casually. Oh, Mrs. Elkins gave them to everyone. Her cousin's company donated office supplies last month. The clerk suddenly realized what she'd said and clamped her mouth shut. 20 minutes and 3 phone calls later, we had the county administrator on speaker. This is highly irregular, he said. What's irregular is preventing a citizen from paying taxes. I countered, Mr. Peterson, are you aware that there's an ongoing investigation into property fraud involving the HOA? Do you really want the tax office implicated in this? There was a long pause. Remove the hold. He finally told the clerk, accept Mr. Caldwell's payment immediately. Grandpa paid his taxes $8,743.16, and we left with receipts in hand. But as we walked to the truck, I spotted a familiar pink tracksuit in the parking lot. Patty Harrington was sitting in a white Mercedes, talking animatedly on her phone. Keep walking, Tom murmured. Don't engage. But Patty had spotted us. She ended her call and strutted over. Apparently having recovered her confidence, well, the cavalry rides to rescue poor, helpless Grandpa. How touching, Mrs. Harrington. You're out on bail. Tom reminded her, the conditions include no contact with witnesses. I'm not making contact. I'm simply using a public parking lot. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. Enjoy your little victory with the taxes. It won't matter when my lawyers are done. Did you know your grandfather's property deed has some interesting discrepancies? Surveys from 1962 that don't match current boundaries? Missing easement documentation? So many technical issues that could invalidate ownership. You're reaching? I said. Am I? My new lawyers are from Dallas. They've won 43 property dispute cases in the last 5 years. They eat small-town sheriffs for breakfast. She looked at Grandpa with mock sympathy. It's nothing personal. Henry, business is business. That water under your land is worth $50 million to the right buyer. Over my dead body. Grandpa growled. Patty's smile widened. Well, you are 82. Actuarially speaking, I stepped between them before Grandpa could lunge at her. That sounded like a threat. Mrs. Harrington, don't be dramatic. I'm simply citing statistics. Elderly people living alone on large properties. Accidents happen. Falls. Fires. Medical emergencies with no one around to help. It would be so much safer for Henry in a nice assisted living facility. Tom was already on his radio calling for backup, but Patty just laughed. Go ahead. Arrest me for citing statistics. My lawyers will have me out in an hour and sue you for harassment. She walked back to her Mercedes, but turned for one last shot. Oh, Jake, You might want to check on Zeus. I heard the stables where he's being kept had some electrical problems. Old wiring. You know, so dangerous. My blood went cold. I was in the truck before she finished her sentence. Tom jumping in beside me while Maria stayed with Grandpa. I called Mabel at Riverside Stables as I drove. Mabel? It's Jake. Is Zeus okay? He's fine. Honey. Why? Patty made a threat. Can you move him somewhere secure? Already done? Soon as I heard she made bail, I had my boys trailer him over to the Mackenzie place. They've got better security, and Bill Mackenzie hates Patty more than anyone. I exhaled in relief. Why does Bill hate her? She tried to fine him for having the wrong breed of dog. Said his mastiffs were aggressively large and didn't fit the community aesthetic. Bill told her what she could do with her aesthetic, and she tried to have his dogs seized. He's been waiting for payback ever since. By the time we got back to the ranch, there were 2 news vans in the driveway. The video of the morning's HOA meeting had gone viral. Apparently, blonde HOA Karen loses it when exposed was trending on social media. A young reporter approached as I got out. Mr. Caldwell? Jesse Wu from Channel 9. Can you comment on allegations that the Pine Ridge HOA has been systematically targeting elderly landowners? I started to wave her off, then reconsidered. If Patty wanted to play the media game, I could too. The only comment I have is that my grandfather has lived on this ranch for 60 years. He's paid his taxes, been a good neighbor, and never asked for anything but to be left in peace. If standing up to bullies who try to steal from the elderly makes news, what does that say about our society? Can you confirm that this is about water rights worth millions? I looked directly at the camera. It's about right and wrong. It's about people thinking that because someone is old, they're weak. My grandfather served 2 tours in Korea, raised 4 kids on this ranch, and buried my grandmother under that oak tree over there. This isn't just property, it's home, and anyone who tries to steal it through forged documents and illegal intimidation is going to find out that some of us still believe in justice. The interview aired on the 6 o'clock news. By 7, my phone was ringing off the hook. Other victims of Patty's schemes were coming forward. The Chens, the Johnsons, a dozen families who'd been driven out or bankrupted by fraudulent fines. But the most interesting call came from an unexpected source. Mr. Caldwell? This is Bradley Morrison, no relation to your sheriff friend. I'm an attorney with Morrison and Associates in Cheyenne. I think we should talk about your water rights. My hackles went up. If you're working for Patty, quite the opposite. I represent Clearwater Industries. We've been trying to negotiate water rights purchases in the area for 3 years. Completely above board. Patricia Harrington has been sabotaging every deal, trying to corner the market herself. Go on. We're prepared to make your grandfather a legitimate offer, $15 million for a 30% water share, keeping full surface rights and residential use for the ranch. But more importantly, we have evidence that might interest you. Patty's been in contact with some overseas investors, promising them water rights she doesn't own. That's wire fraud. I met with Bradley the next morning at the ranch. He was nothing like what I expected. Young, earnest, in a suit that fit but wasn't flashy. He spread documents on Grandpa's kitchen table. These are emails between Patty and a company in Saudi Arabia. She promised them exclusive water rights to the entire valley for $75 million. Prost took a $5 million deposit. Grandpa whistled. $5 million? No wonder she's desperate. It gets worse. Bradley continued. She's been using HOA funds to pay personal debts. The forensic accountant found she's embezzled over $800,000 in the last 2 years. So why come to us? I asked. Because Clearwater wants to do business here long term. We can't have someone like Patty poisoning the well, literally and figuratively. We're willing to testify about her fraud, provide all our documentation. In exchange, we hope you'll consider our offer. No pressure. No timeline. Just honest business. I looked at Grandpa, who nodded slowly. We'll think about it. That afternoon, while Grandpa napped, I sat on the porch going through Bradley's documents. The evidence against Patty was damning. She'd created a web of fake companies, forged documents, and false promises that would make Bernie Madoff proud. My phone buzzed. Marcus Rodriguez Hod Shanta text. Boss. You need to see this. Patty's at town hall with those Dallas lawyers. They're filing something big. I drove to town hall, finding Marcus parked across the street with a telephoto lens. What do you have? They've been in there 2 hours. I did some digging on those lawyers. They're not property dispute specialists. They're criminal defense. The best money can buy. That was interesting. Why would Patty need criminal defense attorneys before she'd even been formally charged? We didn't have to wait long to find out. Tom Morrison came out of town hall looking grim, followed by the district attorney and several other officials. He spotted my truck and walked over. Jake, we've got a problem. Patty's lawyers just filed a motion claiming you and I conspired to frame her. They're saying the whole HOA meeting was a setup, that we planted evidence and coached witnesses. That's insane. It's a defense strategy. Muddy the waters. Make us defend ourselves instead of prosecuting her. Tom's jaw was tight. But here's the real kicker. They've got a witness. Someone willing to testify that you and I planned this whole thing at the diner yesterday morning. My mind raced. The waitress? No. One of my own deputies. Gary Holworth. Apparently, Patty's been paying him for information for months. I felt the anger rise but pushed it down. Getting emotional wouldn't help. So what's our move? We need our own lawyers now. And Jake? They're asking for your carry permit to be revoked, claiming you're unstable and dangerous. The PTSD from the shooting, they're going after my permit. I'd maintained my concealed carry even after leaving law enforcement. It was like they were trying to strip away every piece of my identity. It's all tactics, Tom assured me, but we need to be smart. That evening, I was back at the ranch, trying to figure out our next move when headlights swept across the yard. Not one car dozens. They parked along the drive, and people started getting out. The Chens, the Johnsons, families I'd never met but who all had the same look of determination. Mrs. Chen approached first. Mr. Jake, we heard what that woman is trying to do. We want to help. I appreciate it. But, no buts. Mr. Johnson interrupted. She destroyed our lives, took our homes, our savings. We've been afraid for too long. An elderly black man I didn't recognize stepped forward. Name's Clarence Washington. Patty fined me $30,000 for having a vegetable garden. Said it was an agricultural use in a residential zone. I was growing tomatoes for my grandkids. One by one, they shared their stories. Patty had terrorized the entire valley, using the HOA as her personal weapon, but now they were ready to fight back. We've all got documentation. Mrs. Chen said. Illegal fines, forged documents, recorded threats. My daughter is a paralegal. She's been organizing everything. Her daughter, a young woman named Amy, stepped forward with boxes of files. We've got 43 cases of HOA fraud documented. Patty made almost $2 million in illegal fines over 5 years. I looked at these people, my grandfather's neighbors, my community, and felt something shift. This wasn't just about our ranch anymore. It was about all of them. Okay, I said, here's what we're going to do. We spent the next 3 hours creating a coordinated legal strategy. Amy Chen was brilliant, organizing evidence with the efficiency of someone who'd been waiting for this chance. We had enough to bury Patty in criminal charges, but we needed to counter her offensive against Tom and me first. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Clarence Washington had been recording HOA meetings for years, for my own protection, he said. He had audio of Patty from 3 years ago, bragging about her plans. Play it. I said. Patty's voice filled the room. The old-timers don't understand that progress requires sacrifice. Their sacrifice? Give me 5 years, and I'll own every significant property in this valley. The water rights alone will make us all rich. Who was she talking to? I asked. The HOA board. This was before she got rid of anyone who opposed her. Is one of those board members willing to testify? Clarence smiled. Already called him. Robert Hayes. He's been living with guilt for 3 years, ready to come clean about everything. By midnight, we had a war room set up in Grandpa's barn. Maps of the valley covered one wall, showing every property Patty had targeted. Financial records covered another way, tracking the flow of illegal money. Amy's legal research filled 3 tables. She's been planning this for a decade. Amy said, pointing to a timeline she'd created. Started small. Legitimate fines for real violations. Built credibility. Then slowly expanded her power. Changed the rules. Targeted specific properties. Smart. I admitted grudgingly, like boiling a frog. Except she got greedy. Marcus added. The overseas investors. The water rights scheme, that's what'll nail her. My phone rang. Unknown number. But I answered anyway. Jake, this is Monica Brennan, the fake notary, Patty's accomplice. Her voice was shaking. I need to talk to you. Patty. She's lost it. She's planning something bad. Where are you? The Wagon Wheel Motel. Room 12. Please come alone. I'm scared. It could be a trap. But something in her voice sounded genuinely terrified. I looked at Tom, who nodded. I'll follow at a distance, he said. The Wagon Wheel was the kind of motel that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. I knocked on room 12, hand near my concealed Glock. Monica opened the door, and I barely recognized her. The polished woman from the HOA board was gone, replaced by someone who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Mascara tracked down her cheeks. She's going to burn it down, Monica said without preamble. Your grandfather's ranch? She's got guys coming tonight. When? 3 a.m. She figured you'd all be at the HOA meeting she called for tomorrow morning. Find out about the fire, then make it look like an electrical problem. Why tell me? Monica collapsed on the bed, sobbing. I thought we were just bending rules. You know, making money. But she's talking about your grandfather being in the house when it burns. Says it'll solve all the problems at once. I felt ice in my veins. You're willing to testify to this? I'll testify to everything. The forged documents, the embezzlement. All of it. Just protect me from her. She's got connections real bad. People she owes money to. I called Tom, who brought Monica into protective custody. Then I called a council of war at the ranch. By 2 a.m., we were ready. The arsonists came exactly when Monica said they would. 3 men in a van, carrying gas cans. What they didn't expect was half the valley's residents waiting for them. Along with every law enforcement officer Tom could muster. The arrest was almost anticlimactic. The would-be arsonists gave up without a fight, immediately rolling on Patty. They were just hired muscle, paid $5,000 to torch a barn. They had no idea about the murder plot, but Patty wasn't with them. According to their phones, she was at her house, waiting for confirmation. Let's go get her, Tom said. Wet. I said, let her think it worked. Send her a photo of flames. We'll use the fire training facility. See what she does. It was Amy Chen's idea to live stream what happened next. At 3:47 a.m., Patty received a text saying, it's done, with a photo of flames. At 3:48, she texted back, finally, make sure the old man didn't get out. At 3:49, she called her Saudi investors to confirm she'd have the water rights within days. At 3:50, law enforcement kicked in her door. The arrest video went viral within hours. Patty Harrington, in designer pajamas, screaming about her rights while being led away in handcuffs. The best part was when she saw me standing in her driveway. You? She shrieked. This is entrapment. I'll sue you for everything. Actually, I said calmly, you just confessed to conspiracy to commit arson and murder. Your phone calls are being recorded by the FBI. Wire fraud across international borders is their jurisdiction. The trial was almost an anticlimax. With Monica's testimony, the recorded confessions, and 43 victim impact statements, Patty's expensive lawyers could only negotiate a plea deal, 25 to life for attempted murder, arson conspiracy, Wire Fraud, embezzlement, and racketeering. The day of sentencing, Patty looked smaller somehow. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by jail orange. Her perfectly styled hair hung limp, but her eyes still held that malicious gleam when she looked at me. This isn't over, she mouthed. But it was. The HOA was dissolved by unanimous vote. The properties she'd stolen were returned or compensated. The water rights scheme fell apart, and Clearwater made good on their offer, which Grandpa accepted, securing the ranch's future for generations. 6 months later, I stood on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Zeus grazed in the near pasture. Finally home. Grandpa sat beside me, healthier than he'd been in years without the stress of Patty's harassment. You know, he said, I'm glad you came home. Jake, not just for this mess. It's good having family around. I'd been thinking the same thing. My resignation from the Denver consulting firm was already typed up. Tom had offered me a deputy position, and I was considering it. The valley felt like home in a way the city never had. A car pulled up Amy Chen in a practical Honda. She'd started a legal aid clinic specializing in HOA abuse cases, already helping dozens of families across Wyoming. We'd been having dinner once a week, talking about law and life and the future. Brought Chinese food? She called out. Figured you two bachelors could use a real meal. As we set the table, Grandpa winked at me. Smart girl? Pretty too. Grandpa, I'm just saying. The ranch is big enough for a family. Be nice to hear kids laughing here again. I thought about Patty Harrington, sitting in her cell, consumed by greed and hatred. She'd wanted this land so badly, she'd lost her soul trying to take it, but she'd never understood what made it valuable. It wasn't the water rights or the acreage or the money, it was this family, dinners on the porch, horses in the pasture, neighbors who'd stand with you against any threat. It was home, and that's something you can't steal, no matter how many documents you forge. Hey Jake, Amy said, pulling out her phone, you've got to see this. Someone made a documentary about the whole thing. It's called The HOA Queen Who Met Her Match. Already has 2 million views. I groaned. Please tell me they didn't use that photo from the arrest where I'm in my pajamas. Oh, they definitely did. You're a meme now. Pajama sheriff saves the day. Grandpa laughed so hard, he nearly choked on his lo mein. Pajama sheriff. I love it. And sitting there, listening to their laughter mix with the evening bird songs, I realized something. I'd spent 2 years running from my past, from the shooting that had ended my career and nearly broken me. But sometimes, running takes you exactly where you need to be. Patty Harrington had meant to destroy us. Instead, she'd brought me home, given Grandpa an army of supporters, and created a community stronger than ever. Evil has a way of doing that, making good people stand up and stand together. To unintended consequences. I said, raising my beer, to family, Grandpa added, to justice. Amy finished. We clinked bottles as the sun set over Caldwell Ranch, painting the sky in shades of victory. Somewhere in a federal prison, Patty Harrington was learning that karma, like water, always finds its level. And sometimes, it drowns you.